Hi there, so welcome to a series of videos where I'm going to be exploring stress and anxiety and how lockdown has been affecting that and how we can all look after our mental health and improve our well-being. In this video I'm going to talk about what stress and anxiety are and what we can do to begin to start challenging them. So firstly, what is stress? Well, stress isn't always a bad thing. Dr. Kelly McGonigal tells us that stress is what arises when something that we care about is at stake. For example, you might have found that when you have a deadline or an exam, you're more motivated to study because you're a bit stressed. So stress in small doses is what motivates us and gives us the energy and the drive that we need to get stuff done. However, when we don't give ourselves downtime to relieve that stress, or that stress builds up to really high levels, that's bad, and we can start to have things like headaches, finding it difficult to sleep. So stress is something that can be a force for good, but you need to keep an eye on it and make sure that you are looking after yourself and recognizing when you're feeling stressed too. Anxiety is similar but different. It's a feeling of unease that leads to worry and fear that is kept going by unhelpful thinking patterns. So if you are someone who struggles with anxiety, you might find that sometimes you get into a bit of a thought spiral and you can't stop worrying. And you probably find that it's difficult to relax as well. And, anxiety just makes you feel like you're on your guard the whole time. And it can lead to physical symptoms too, such as headaches again, difficulty sleeping, sometimes digestive problems, and it can also lead to panic attacks. This is where basically your body is going into fight or flight mode. And it can be really distressing. So I'm someone who has anxiety and I've had many panic attacks in the past. And for me, it feels kind of like, hyperventilating. You feel like you can't breathe. You just feel very completely overwhelmed. And for me, I feel quite lightheaded as well. And I feel like I'm gonna maybe pass out, and it can be really scary having a panic attack, especially if it's the first time, but it's really important to remember that it will pass and it's not dangerous. Even though it feels like you're going to faint, you can't really faint from a panic attack because your blood pressure is actually going up rather than down. So yeah, just remember that it will pass and that there are things you can do about it. If you are feeling that you're really anxious and you're starting to experience panic attacks, remember that school is here for you. You can talk to one of the chaplains, you can talk to Mrs. Leonard, your form tutor, your head of year. There are so many people who want to help you and support you, and of course you can talk to your GP as well. So what can we do to kind of prevent anxiety taking hold and getting out of control? Well, I think part of it comes down to identifying the unhelpful thinking patterns that keep the anxiety going, and this draws on an approach called CBT. And so there are 3 unhelpful thinking patterns that I'm going to talk to you today. So one is threat scanning. That is when you constantly feel like you're on the lookout for danger. And in the current climate with the coronavirus, you might find that you're always checking your symptoms. You clear your throat and think, oh, is that a cough? Have I got coronavirus? Or you feel like you constantly need to take your temperature. And so that kind of threat scanning, constantly checking for danger and problems, when that kind of goes into overdrive, that is an unhelpful thinking pattern that can, keep us stuck in anxiety. Another one is catastrophizing, sometimes referred to as making a mountain out of a molehill. And it's basically where your mind jumps to the worst case scenario. So for example, yes, there is a risk that some of us might get coronavirus and we should do all that we can to prevent that happening. So, wearing our masks, using the hand sanitizer. But if you're really anxious about it, your mind might go to this place where you think, oh my goodness, if I get coronavirus, I'm going to die. Statistically, that's very unlikely. And what anxiety does is it always jumps to the worst case scenario, even if that scenario is unlikely. So just keep an eye out, because catastrophizing really increases our anxiety, and it's good to spot it when you're doing it. And the final thinking pattern I want to talk to you about today is hypothetical worry. And this is when we get stuck in a habit of constantly thinking, what if? what if this happens? What if it doesn't happen? What if there's never a vaccine? Or what if there's another lockdown? And it's that uncertainty that can kind of cause that way of thinking. But the fact is, when we are always thinking about what if, it's usually about things that we can't control. And so going down that spiral of what if this, what if that, that is only going to make us feel worse. So those are the thinking patterns that we need to be aware of and spot: threat scanning, catastrophizing, and hypothetical worry, or what if thinking. But there are ways that we can become more aware of this and do more to challenge it when we see it in ourselves. So one method is known as the ABCDE technique, and this is a method of thought challenging. So it's just an acronym, and I'll break it down for you. So the first letter is attention, and this basically means that you pay attention, notice when you are feeling anxious, take a step back and think, okay, what is going on in my mind right now? Can I spot one of those unhelpful thinking patterns? Am I catastrophizing here, or worrying about something I can't control? So the first step, again, is attention, paying attention to what is going on in your mind. Secondly, B for believe. Don't automatically believe your anxious thoughts and assume they are true, because the fact is most of the things that we worry about don't actually happen. And so, anxiety is our body's way of trying to keep us safe and prevent threats. So we do often jump to the worst case scenario, but we've got to remember that just because we're worried something might happen, it doesn't mean that it will happen. So this step is all about just kind of taking a step back and being like, okay, what are the facts? What are some alternative opinions here? C stands for challenge. So building on from the last point, are your worries based on facts or opinions, and what is the bigger picture? One way to challenge your thoughts is to think about what you might say to a friend. If a friend came to you and said, I'm really anxious about this or that, how would you reassure them? Maybe you'd give them some alternative points, you'd kind of point them to some evidence that challenged those anxious thoughts for them, and you would reassure them. Try giving that reassurance to yourself, because you deserve it too. Speaking to yourself like you would speak to a friend is one of the most effective ways to challenge anxious thoughts. D stands for discount. We have to recognise that anxiety and worry sometimes completely dominate our thoughts, and it can be overwhelming. So discount is all about recognising that you're feeling overwhelmed by anxiety right now and choosing to let those thoughts and worries go. And we'll talk more about how to do that in the next video. And finally, E stands for exploring options. What can you focus on right now? What are your options here? So you can problem solve and be proactive. You can think, what is one practical thing I can focus on right now? You might want to look at your option of talking to someone. Who can I talk to? Again, the chaplaincy team, form tutors, the inclusion department, Mrs. Leonard, whoever in school you feel comfortable talking to, open up and talk to your friends and family if you want to as well. Exploring options is basically thinking, what can I control about this situation right now, and focusing on taking action on that rather than worrying about the things that we can't control. So those are some of the things that go on our mind when we're feeling stressed and anxious. And in future videos, we're going to look at some practical tools that you can add to your toolbox to look after your mental health. This has been a difficult and stressful time for all of us, and ultimately we all experience some kind of anxiety at some point in our lives. So it's really good to be able to think about what you can do to prevent it and to help yourself, even if you're not feeling stressed right now. So I hope you'll tune into the next video, and we're going to go into more detail then. Bye.